so he could be the chair.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
is,
Mike,
that's the other, I
Ken's
don't
not
see
here,
Ken.
and Nathan.
Yeah, Ken and Nathan aren't coming.
All right.
I think we're good to go.
Ken's not coming, Nathan's not coming, and Frank has not arrived, so, okay.
All right, let me start it, Carl. You're all
Hold
set.
it. Where is, there's Michael.
You're ready to go.
All right, good. Welcome everyone to the Hillsborough Planning Board meeting of April 8th, 2021. Please note that this meeting will be conducted virtually. All board members, staff, and consultants will be participating remotely. The public will be given an opportunity to participate remotely through the advertised Zoom link or optional phone number identified in the public meeting notice. Members of the public should use the raise hand feature in Zoom or by pressing *9 if participating by telephone to indicate that you would like to be recognized to speak. Meeting and application documents have been made available on the township's website, Civic Clerk, in accordance with the public meeting notice. Applicants will be presenting remotely and will identify themselves before testifying. With that, please join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be advised this meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, otherwise known as the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2021 annual meeting schedule has been provided to the officially designated newspapers, the Township Clerk, posted on the bulletin board at the Hillsborough Township Municipal Complex, and posted to the Township's website. Additional notice has been provided to communicate that this meeting is being conducted according to the governor's executive orders and pursuant to Public Law 2020, C.11, which allows for meetings to be conducted electronically, and pursuant to the local finance notices recently established in the state of New Jersey. With that, may I have a roll call for both board members and board and township professionals?
Okay, so tonight, Mr. Santaramita and Mr. Hestag are expected to be absent, and Deputy Mayor Delcor is not here yet. Mr. Emick,
Here.
Mr. Ciccarelli,
Here.
Mr. Wagner,
Here.
Mr. Peason,
Here.
Mr. Scobo,
Here.
Mayor Lapani,
Present.
Vice Chair Julian,
Here.
Chair Sirachi,
Here.
Mr. Kinsler,
Here.
Mr. Gorman.
You're on mute.
Here.
Mr. Euro,
Here.
Mr. Bernstein.
Not sure. Yes, here.
Okay, so we're good. So welcome again, everybody. Up next, let's go through the agenda. We do not have any consideration of meeting minutes nor resolutions. I do not see any planning board business unless Mr. Maskey has something.
Oh, this is Mr. Gorman, but nothing.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Nothing to add this time.
Okay. And we do not have consideration of ordinances, so I will go to business from the floor for matters that are not on this evening's agenda. So if there's anybody in the public that would like to comment or address the board on items not on this evening's agenda, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if dialing in by phone. And I do not see anybody.
I see none either, Chairman.
Okay, so we are moving on to this evening's applications. Excuse me. First up, Hillsborough 206 Holdings LLC, file number 18-PB-07-MSPV 2019 amended site plan. So, Mr. Bernstein or Mr. Gorman, if you would like to.
I'll be happy. As the board may or may not remember, Hillsborough 206 Holdings is an inclusionary affordable housing project on the bypass. that was approved a while ago. The individuals were in for preliminary and final major site plan approval back in February of last year. And at the time had indicated there were issues potentially involving the commercial aspect of the project. One of the conditions the board put on the application was that obviously it was in Hillsborough 206 Holdings LLC's interest to deal with that issue, and or to give the board an update, not only on the commercial, but the overall side of the project. They were basically to report back a year from now. And I see Mr. Hoff is here on behalf of his client. And that's why we're here this evening. We're here for Mr. Hoff to throw himself on the feet of the board and tell us what's new and exciting. So,
Thank
Mr. Chairman, Richard Hoff Jr. Esquire from Biscayne Hoff.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Mr. Hoff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bernstein, as Mr. Bernstein indicated, I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Hillsborough 206 LLC, 206 Holdings LLC. Mr. Bernstein accurately represents the history of it. This is a mixed-use project consisting of 175 total units and about 14,500 square feet of commercial space. We were in the approval process back in 2009. We originally came in, as Mr. Bernstein indicated, for a preliminary and final major site plan. We then amended that towards the end of 2009. We made some architectural adjustments and some small adjustments to the overall site. And at that particular hearing, the issue came up of, well, what's the pace? There was discussion about the pace of construction. The thought being the board didn't want to see a residential project not having a complementary falling behind non-residential portion. So in the resolution, it was agreed we'd come back in a year, or if we were to hit 50% of the COs was in the residential portion, to update the board as to the status of the non-residential component, the retail side.
Richard, you're talking 2019, not 2009, correct?
Sorry, 2019, that's correct.
Just want to apologize for interrupting, but
No, I appreciate that clarification. The resolution was adopted for that second approval in February of 2020. So as this board might imagine, 1 month later, the world turns upside down. We weren't even able to get out all the approvals for the project until the end of 2020, given issues with COVID. And we haven't even pulled our first building permit for the residential component of the project. So the idea that we were potentially going to be in a position 1 year from now to be well further on the residential side of things didn't come to pass for reasons that I don't need to bore this board with as to what happened. Despite the delays given COVID, we have been trying to move forward. There is some work out on the site. I'm sure if board members drive by, they could see some activity. We are in for our first permit on the residential side. And we're obviously trying to market the commercial portion as well. It's obviously in our interest, it's in the community's interest. And right now, given the COVID environment, the questions we keep getting are, although we're getting inquiries from some, relatively high-end users, the first question always is on you got to drive through, because the COVID world is, not indoors anymore for certain eateries and coffee shops, the names of which I don't need to get into, but those have been the inquiries. And frankly, given the zoning, we're not permitted to have any drive-through here. So those offers haven't really gone anywhere. But frankly, on the retail side, the COVID hangs over everything right now. So it's really difficult for us to give the board any type of direction as to where we think we will be in 3-6 months on the retail non-residential component. Our hope is that the world turns back to normal in some sense, and we see the more traditional uses coming back on the retail and the non-residential side. I have with me, I have our engineer, I have our an applicant's representative, I have our broker representative, all of which the board can feel free to ask questions. But I thought, in an effort to potentially streamline this, what we would really be requesting of the board is to allow us to come back it's with the same condition we have right now, because we've almost effectively stood in place to a certain extent. So what we would be asking the board is if we could carry that 1-year condition, 50% CO on the residential side forward from tonight and come back when we have like meaningful information to give this board, other than, you know, we've endured the pains of a pandemic for the last 12 months, as we all have, but it's obviously been a real negative on the retail side to try and market retail and non-residential space in that climate. So you can certainly hear that from our experts, but that was really what we would like to propose to the board. We're certainly committed to the non-residential space, and we're committed to keeping this board apprised of the status of that. But we don't think we have anything really meaningful to share at this point, simply because it's been so challenging over the last 12 months.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, we're really at the board's pleasure.
Excuse me?
We're really at the board's pleasure for how you want to handle it. That was just what we thought would be the best course moving forward.
Any board members? Comment, question?
I don't know. Go ahead, Patrick. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to confirm to the board that they just came in for their zoning permits a few weeks ago for just one of the residential buildings, and I believe the clubhouse.
So they've applied for the first permit.
Correct.
Chairman, I would be in favor of extending a 1-year contingency or extension to as the attorney requested, to the circumstances he described, in order to give them the opportunity under a better environment to fulfill their project and obligation.
Is that a motion? Is that a motion, Sean?
That is a motion, yes.
Do we, well, before that, Mr. Bernstein, should I see to open the public?
Well,
Would that be?
yes, but let me ask a question. Mr. Hoff commented about this in his comments about the issue of drive-through. At some point, Richard, is your client thinking about coming back to this board and seeking an amendment to the plan regarding same?
I don't expect that at this point, and I don't know that this board could grant the relief because it's prohibited by the ordinance. So we would have to go back to either council or potentially go to the zoning board for that relief. It's not what we're expecting right now. As I've indicated, the hope is.
Isn't your approval based on a settlement agreement approved by the court?
It is.
So actually, we'd have to get Judge Miller's approval first. I'm just raising the issue. If there is a desire for the township to consider this issue, and obviously I am not speaking A, on behalf of my client, or B, on behalf of the mayor and his colleagues, that the time to deal with it might be sooner than later. Not the least of which is, I think, his honor is planning on departing early next year.
If that's something that, again, we've been trying to live within the ordinance, I certainly don't, to your point, I don't know the pleasure of the council as to whether that be something they'd be willing to entertain. Certainly, as you might imagine, gives us greater flexibility to be able to market it. But if it's something that would be considered, more opportunities are better than less from our perspective, certainly.
I'm suggesting that rather, and I'm not looking for the mayor to comment, nor Mr. Gorman, who's playing acting director tonight, but it might make sense for your clients to have a conversation with the planning department.
I'd be happy to pass that
Or
along.
at least to give the township at least options to consider. Whether they accept it is another issue.
Agreed. No, we'd be happy to do that.
Since apparently Mr. Hoff and I are the only two witnesses here tonight, Mr. Chairman, a motion to open to the public to the extent that anyone has questions of Mr. Hoff or his clients is applicable before the mayor and Mr. Scobo's motion to continue this situation another year.
Okay. So is there a motion to open to public?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. So if there's anyone in the public or in the audience that would like to, I already see a hand coming up, so I don't need to say how to do this.
Okay, I
So,
will. Just please, when you're allowed to talk, state your name and address for the record, spelling your last name, please.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi, this is Maria Janusik. Hold on, please. Maria Janusik, 720 East Freck Avenue, Manville, New Jersey. And I'm also a Hillsborough Township property owner, Block 86, Lot 3, 2155 Camp Lane Road. So what exactly is going on with the residential aspect? I know that there's problems with the commercial, but there's also an issue with the residential.
No, the residential is moving forward. As was indicated, we've applied for our first building permit for the clubhouse within the project.
Okay, so were there issues with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for this project?
No, we're not. We've received all outside agency approvals for the project.
Was there contamination on this property at some point somewhere?
I don't know the answer to that. I can ask our engineer, Mr. Ward.
Okay, because if there was contamination, then we'd need to know what was done about that before you start getting applying for permits to the township if we don't know if all of that was cleared up.
No, that would have had to have been cleared up. We wouldn't be able to apply for the current permits that we've applied for. That would have been an outside agency approval that's been satisfied. Just sitting here right now, I don't know if that was on the list of outside agency approvals to be obtained.
Okay, so would an answer to that be available with all of the paperwork that is in the planning board with this application?
It would.
It would?
Yes.
Okay, so this project is under the affordable housing umbrella, yes?
It was one of the inclusionary sites approved by the court. That's correct.
Okay, so this Hillsborough, just a minute. This applicant, Hillsborough 206 Holdings LLC, was an intervener in the affordable housing
That is
situation?
That is correct.
Okay, and so there's a settlement agreement. Would that be part of the application, all of the paperwork that is with the application in the Hillsborough Township Planning Department?
That I'm assuming it would be within the planning department, whether it's attached to this application or not. Sitting here right now, I don't know the answer to that. I believe it was submitted as part of the application itself, but it's certainly available. Public document.
Okay. So now what exactly is going on? What exactly is going on now? What approval are you asking for? When are you going to be coming back for this?
There was a condition in the approval that required us to return to the board at the period of 1 year or 50% of the COs for the residential portion of the project to report as to the status of the project, both on the residential and the non-residential side. That 1 year expired in February of 2021. We had submitted a letter in January indicating our intent to return to the board, which, given just the way the calendar fell, was tonight. We have not approached 50% of COs for the residential portion. We don't even have a building permit yet for the residential portion. So what was anticipated at the time of the original approval never came to fruition, in large part because of the COVID pandemic. What we were requesting tonight is to have that 1 year or 50% condition carry forward for an additional year, because we find ourselves really, frankly, where we thought we would have been at this point last year. We expect to be there at this point next year.
Okay, so what is the expectation 1 year from now as far as the commercial, as far as the residential, which was supposed to be today? What is the expectation a year from now? As far as residential, as far as commercial?
The residential will continue to build out, but again, it'll be subject to the 50% rule. So it won't get more than 50% of build out before we have to come back before this board to provide them the update. And we will continue to aggressively market the non-residential portion. That's obviously in our interest to do so. We have no interest in empty space out on the site. So we'll continue to do that and hope that we're able to report at either the year or 50% that we have the buildings leased out and permits are in for the buildings to be constructed. That would be the hope.
Okay, all right. So since you're applying for your first permits for the residential aspects of the development, every requirement has been met as far as the residential aspect of this development? All of the requirements, all of the agencies that needed to be applied to, everyone has been applied to, and you've gotten positive responses from them?
But we have all outside agency approvals, but the last check on that is the township planning office. And that's why we have to submit a zoning permit, which is currently under review. And they will themselves confirm that all of those conditions have been satisfied, or else we won't be able to get our zoning permit or our building permit. So they will also confirm that as well.
Okay, so what is required for this zoning permit? What do you have to satisfy to get the zoning permit?
You have to satisfy that what you're proposing is consistent with the approval. You have to then satisfy you've met all the conditions of those approvals, which include all the outside agencies, and you've met all other applicable township ordinances. And that's what is reviewed by the zoning office to confirm that all of those things have been done. And then when they confirm that those things have been satisfied, you then move to the construction aspect, and the construction permit needs to be reviewed by the township construction office, who will then review it from we'll call it the nuts and bolts, to make sure the buildings are being proposed correctly, more architectural things, those types of issues. The outside agency approval stuff that you mentioned occurs at the zoning board review, and then the building gets reviewed from the uniform construction code at the building permit phase.
Okay, so before you get that zoning permit, you can already apply for permits for construction?
No, you can't get a construction permit without the zoning officer also signing off on the application.
Okay, so I don't understand then. What is the first permit that you've applied for?
I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt because
Sure.
Ms. Janusik, can you keep questions pertinent to the application, not on the planning approval process? If you're interested in that, I am sure the planning office has some documents or guidance documents that they could provide on the actual planning approval process.
I'm interested in what's going on with this development. And the attorney said that the first permit was applied for. So that's what I'm asking about, the first permit for
And
this
I think
development.
we've confirmed that about 3 or 4 times already. So is there anything additional?
No, I had asked a question and then someone interrupted.
Well, this is the chairman. I'm trying to keep the meeting moving along. These
I
questions
understand.
can be pertinent to the application itself, not a Q&A session on the planning process.
No, I asked the first permit for the residential aspect. How can you apply for that when you don't have a zoning permit yet?
It's all part of the planning process. They're not doing anything that's not unique or out of the ordinary. And again, if you have questions about the planning process and the order or the sequence, of the various applications, approvals, the nuts and bolts of the process, I would suggest reaching out to the planning office for some, I'm sure, again, they have some guidance documents available.
Okay. I just asked a simple question and it required a simple answer. That's all. How do you apply for a permit for anything if you haven't got the zoning permit yet? That's all I asked. You're telling me I can apply, I can find out the process and on and on. I asked one question and I just am requesting an answer to that question.
Typically, you request the zoning construction permit at the same time.
At the same time.
That's typically how we do it, yes.
I'm sorry, and who answered that?
That was the applicant, Mr. Hawk.
Who?
The applicant's attorney? That's
The
who.
attorney.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And I have a question for Attorney Bernstein. You made a comment. Is this correct that Judge Miller will be leaving the bench soon?
I believe he becomes retirement eligible next year.
So there's possibility he will be leaving the bench next year.
That's what,
All right.
that's a rumor I'm hearing.
Okay, all right, just a rumor. Okay, all right, thank you very much for now.
Anyone else from the public?
I see none, Chairman.
Do not see any, so we will motion to close to public.
So moved.
Bob Wagner will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I believe we have on the table a motion and a second to grant an extension of an additional year to the applicant. But before we go to roll call, just one last chance for any board members, comments, questions?
Obviously, Richard, if you have information prior to the year, your client will appear if necessary.
Sure, we are proposing that that same 50% condition remain as well. So that would, if that occurs first, then we'd be here within the year.
Mr. Bernstein's Patrick, just for a point of clarification, they will be coming back a year from the memorialized action or from today's date?
Today,
Okay, if there are no additional questions, comments, roll call, please. You're on mute. There you go.
Mr. Emick,
Yes.
Mr. Ciccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Peason,
Yes.
Mr. Scobo,
Yes.
Mayor Lapani,
Yes.
Vice Chair Julian,
yes.
Chair Sirachi.
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you all very
Mr.
much.
Huff.
Thank you very much.
All right, good
Hopefully
night.
you're back sooner than later.
We hope so.
Okay. So up next, we have one additional applicant for this evening, SunPower Corporation, otherwise known as Comcast Cable. File number is 20-PB-02-SPV. Mr. Bernstein, would you like to summarize?
As the board may recall, Mr. DeGrazia and his clients were here last fall seeking certain applications relative to solar panels and related items on the Comcast site on Amwell Road. They are now seeking a waiver from a minimum buffer area in addition to the previous approved minor site plan. Seek both variance and waivers. I think council can further elaborate on his client's application. I believe he is here this evening if he would introduce himself.
Sure, Chris.
And I apologize, Christopher, if I butchered your name.
Nope, good enough. For the record, I'm Christopher DeGrazia from the law firm of Fagery, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith. And as Mr. Bernstein said, I represent SunPower Corporation. We were back here before this board on November 5th, 2020 on a renewable energy project, essentially a ground-mounted solar array system at the Comcast site off of I think it's 279 Amwell Road. So the Comcast building off of Amwell Road. You're all very familiar with that. So after the approval, applicant revised the plans in accordance with the approval. There were some conditions, some adjustments, but basically put a plan set together, sent it into the municipality. And Dave Maskey gave us a call and said, listen, one of the things we really didn't focus on was there's a provision on pipelines in the Hillsborough ordinance that sets forth buffers outside of the easement area. So whenever you have a pipeline or and includes gas lines, I think transmission lines, the municipality, it was kind of a unique ordinance, has a buffer that runs out, from that border of the easement, not even from the pipe or the transmission line, and goes out into the neighboring properties. So although we spent a considerable amount of time talking about what we were proposing and the location of the gas main, we really didn't focus on or request relief for that waiver. And the reason why we're here tonight is to make sure that it's part of that record, and we request the waiver and present it to you this evening. When you take a look at the that section of the code, as I said, it's 188-75. The real purpose was to basically keep away habitable structures from the pipeline. I think it was probably adopted after one of those horrible incidents in, I think, North Jersey, where there was some sort of explosion and near I think it was an apartment complex. But anyway, it reads no new building construction, but then it also talks about land disturbance, or land disturbance shall be permitted within 75 feet of the right of way of any distribution, gathering, or transmission line. So although we don't have any habitable structures, we don't have any buildings, we are doing some work within that 75-foot area. It's limited to some minimal disturbance. So we have landscape plantings, we have fencing, we have permeable pavers because we have this access area, and then we have posts related to the solar array. Those posts, as I indicated in my letter, I think I said 70 feet, 7 feet, they actually go down 6 feet. We have shrubs probably going in about 2 to 3 feet. I mean, we're talking about very little disturbance in that area. We could pull up the plan. I have with me this evening too, our project engineer. I also have our project manager, and we have our planner that we had at our first hearing in case there's any type of questions. But essentially that's the case. We're not here to change anything or to request any changes to our plan. It's identical to the plan that we showed, other than shifting things in accordance with the way the board asked us to, in terms of, I think, some of the fence lines and landscape lines changed. They were mostly based on neighbors' comments, if you probably recall that night. So again, we're not proposing any changes. We're just identifying a waiver of a section of the code that wasn't really specifically discussed or granted on that evening.
Okay. So just a little commentary and background on that ordinance, because I was on the committee when we passed it. I think Mr. Wagner, you might have been, if you were, because this goes back quite a while.
I believe I was, Chairman.
Yep. So, yeah, it was out of safety concerns. Obviously, as you pointed out, New Jersey unfortunately had a series of, of gas explosions, but it was also a reason why, with regards to any disturbances, because there's some thought that if you're running heavy equipment in that area, that it could, perhaps compromise, those lines also. So that's probably going to be my first question, though, is if you're going to be doing some work in that, within that buffer, what kind of equipment do you expect to be going through there? If it's going to be, any heavy, construction equipment.
Excellent. Yeah, so there is no blasting, and I think we'll have a Bobcat for the plantings, but let me get our project engineer to talk about, Walter, should that be you talking about that?
I think I can start that, and if there's any
Okay.
questions, then Cody can probably fill in.
All right, let me just swear you in, okay?
Yeah,
Yeah, we need to swear you
I
in.
was gonna say.
Do you swear any testimony you give tonight is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And for the record, could you state and spell your name, please?
Walter Bronson, WALTER BRONSON.
Thank you.
He qualified as a professional engineer last time. Would you like to go through his qualifications again, or will you accept?
Please, and also indicate, Mr. Bronson, by whom you're employed.
Be happy to. I am employed by Dewberry Engineers. I am the group manager for the Land Development Department. I've been an engineer in New Jersey for about 35 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. I've been doing site plans around the state during that entire time. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a lot of solar projects all across the country, but especially here in New Jersey. As Chris noted, I have appeared before this board and many other boards previously and been accepted as a professional.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, does any member of the board have any questions of Mr. Bronson as to his qualifications?
okay, so I don't see anyone taking any opposition, so we will accept, and please continue, Mr. Bronson.
Sure, thank you very much. Would it be helpful to put the plan up on the screen for everyone?
Yep, and
Yep.
let's mark that A1.
That's
So
the
this
screen
is-
you'd like, right, Mr. Bronson?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is our revised plan that is to meet the conditions of the original approval. The plantings have been relocated, fence has been relocated, as was discussed at the original planning board meeting. The only other addition to this is the 75-foot setback line, which is the dashed line that cuts through the top third down below that a little bit.
Oh, keep going.
Keep going down. Right there, that dashed line right there is the required setback line per the ordinance that we're here about tonight. There are about 54 posts for the canopies, for the array that sit in that area. Also, there is the roadway, fence, and plantings, as Chris first talked about. The plantings will be handled by a small bobcat. They're a couple foot deep hole. There's nothing significant about that. The chain link fence is a typical chain link fence, augured holes, 2 to 3 feet deep. There is no significant grading, so there's no need to have any heavy equipment out on this site. For the roadway that's shown in the hatch, yes, exactly. We'll have to strip off the topsoil and then lay in the honeycomb grid and the stone that stabilizes that turf area for emergency access and maintenance. That, again, I would expect to be done with a very small dozer or front end loader. There would be no need for anything large out here. The posts that support the canopies, I'm sorry, I keep going to canopies, support the arrays are driven posts. There'd be a small driving rig that would come out here and drop a 1,500-pound hammer on those posts to drive them 6 feet into the ground. And all of the closest, the closest post that we have to the gas main is roughly 50 feet away, in excess actually of 50 feet away.
Any board members? Well, maybe. Euro, do you have any comments?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So no concerns from your end?
No, we had issued a letter dated March 26th, revised March 31st of 2021, based on the testimony provided with the small equipment that's going to be utilized to install these solar arrays. I do not see any impacts to the pipeline.
Okay, thank you. Any board members, comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Lapani. So as a matter of procedure and protocol, I'm sure there'll be a mark out done of the pipeline. And is there anyone that needs to be out there on site while you're working there from the owners of the pipeline, Texas Eastern or anything like that?
There will certainly be a mark out that is done. As far as whether someone from the utility would come out to be present, I don't know what their protocols are.
But there would be a call for a mark out as normal protocol.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Just for the record. And the plantings, so if you could, just for those watching, can you indicate where the actual pipeline is on the plan?
It's that blue. No, it's above the blue. It's the G.
If you go where
Right
the,
there, the G.
that's it, exactly,
Yep.
yep.
So, oh, I guess that's north of all the trees, correct?
That's correct. Yes, all the trees have been pulled out of the easement area, actually. There may be that hatched area, the square hatched area. We'll have some small shrubs and ground cover in it. But any of the larger trees are actually outside of the easement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Bronson, could you just refresh my memory? Because I remember we reconfigured the buffer area and the arrays. There was, I don't remember, I don't have the Environmental Commission report. I looked for it today and I guess I didn't hold on to it. But was it because of wetlands that we reconfigured the buffer, or was it a stream corridor?
No, we have none of that on this site, sir. The primary interest was the resident to the left of this site and trying to provide as big a buffer as we could to his property that kind of goes to his backyard. As part of the reconfiguration, things have moved further away from that property line. And we've agreed as a condition of approval to meet with him and with your professionals when the site is cleared and to see what's actually left out there, tree and undergrowth wise, and we'll supplement that if necessary in order to screen his property. But there are no wetlands or floodplains or anything else of that nature on this property.
But I do remember we spent some time.
I know what you're talking about. Our original plan proposed a landscape buffer of 42 feet, and the Environmental Commission said meet the 50 feet requirement, and we did that. That's what you're referring to.
And that in effect changed the configuration of the array.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't.
So there were two changes. We pulled it back from 42 to 50, and then we adjusted the sideline to better protect the neighbor.
Okay, yeah, I remember there was a lot of work and discussion on that, but I didn't remember the particulars and I don't have the report in there. So I just, the reason I asked is just to refresh my memory and double check that none of that is going to change.
Correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions for the witness. Can you go up to the legend for the gas main? Yes, thank you. So does that, does this mean there's 4 gas mains in that trench, if you will?
Yes, there are.
Okay, and do we know if are we measuring from the center of those 4, or do we know how that trench is configured?
That is I'm sorry. That is the closest gas main to the property. The
Okay,
other 3
great.
would be further away.
Okay, great.
That easement, I think, is 175 feet wide, if I remember correctly.
Oh, so that's just from the closest one. Okay.
That's correct.
And do you know how deep those pipelines are buried?
I do not.
Okay. I think that would ease our pain a little bit if we know they're buried, that they're down in a trench that's down at 8 feet or so, and we're driving down to 6. So I'd maybe request that we find out how deep those pipelines are buried.
We can certainly contact the owner and obtain that information.
Thanks. That would be great. That's all I had. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other board members before we make a motion to open the public? Okay, so I will ask for a motion to open to the public.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we have 2 hands jumped up, so
Okay.
I will
I'll
let
take-
you take the choice.
Again, please state your name and address for the record, spelling your last name, please. And these are questions for this witness and this applicant.
Maria Janusik, Janucik. Okay, first of all, why wasn't this fact that there is a gas pipeline there, why wasn't that presented at the original meeting?
It was presented.
It was presented?
Mhm.
So why is it an issue now?
It's not an issue now. What we identified was a waiver that was not specifically called out before. But at the first hearing, we spent considerable time talking about where the pipeline was. We showed the location and we talked about what was being proposed in relation to the pipeline.
At the beginning of your answer, you said that there was a waiver that wasn't called out?
Correct.
And whose waiver, and who applied for that waiver?
We just applied for it as part of this application.
And it was just totally ignored at the first meeting?
No, it was something that was not specifically discussed. So we are doing it again tonight so that the record's clear.
Okay, so that sounds kind of strange, that it was something that you didn't want to discuss. Okay, so now, why?
No, it wasn't, ma'am. It wasn't something they didn't want to discuss.
Well,
When the planning department reviews an application, it reviews it in relation not only to the land use law, it reviews it in terms of township ordinances. Unfortunately, this ordinance, this provision of the code was not discovered by the planning department until after council's client came before the planning board and got its approval to do the project. And they were asked to come back and seek the waiver that they would have asked for at the original application if it had been pointed out that such would be a required waiver. So that's why we're here this evening.
Okay, well,
Otherwise, council would have asked for it in the first place and it would have been addressed last November.
well, to me, it's kind of shocking that a gas pipeline was not identified initially for this application.
Yeah,
And
Mrs.
so,
Ma'am,
and
it
so.
was
identified.
It was identified. It was
And
not only
ignored.
identified.
No, for the
no,
fourth time, it was identified.
It was identified. As Mr. Bronson testified, it was discussed rather extensively. The issue is a buffer between the gas pipe, the southernmost edge of the gas pipeline, or the northernmost, depending on which way you measure it, and the applicant's solar arrays. There is a requirement of a 50-foot buffer for such. That issue was what was not, and I'll use council's word, called out, i.e. identified. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was ignored. It was a mistake that has to now be corrected.
Okay, so why is it that this solar array has to be so close that you can't have a 75-foot buffer?
So if we pulled it back, there would be it would be lose 1/3 of its space, and it would not be able to, it would eventually essentially kill the project and take away an inherently beneficial use, which is renewable energy. So it would be a hardship due to the unique shape of the property. And that's why we're here.
So how much land mass was actually required for a project like this in this zone? How much was actually required for this?
I'm not sure of your.
Sure, I understand that question.
I believe a waiver was submitted because the land was smaller than is required. So I'm asking, what was the original? What is the required land mass in this zone for this kind
The
of
waiver,
project.
the waiver is not being required because it is undersized. The waiver is being required relative to the buffer area and having something within the buffer area, not because it's undersized.
I'm not talking about the waiver now for the closeness to this pipeline. I'm talking
That's the-
about this project. I may be confused because I've listened to a couple of these planning board. I know you're shaking your head. I see that, Attorney Bernstein.
Good.
The site
50
is not undersized. The site is 5.8 acres, and it's required to be 5 acres.
So it's a 5 acre requirement,
5.8.
5 acre requirement.
Correct.
So then if you've got 5 acres, why does this have to be? All right, you know what? What I'm going to say is I've looked at some of the paperwork that was provided for this meeting. And so there was a memo from planner David Maskey to the planning board. And it says that there's an existing gas pipeline. And it says that refers to section 188-75 of the Hillsborough Township Code, which specifically states that no new building construction or land disturbance shall be permitted. And the purpose of this provision is to address safety. So this was never brought up initially when the whole project was talked about and everything, and now it comes like an aside last minute. And the whole purpose of this section 188-75 of the Hillsborough Township Code is to address safety. And that's very important for the people that live close by and for the people that live a little further away. This is a serious thing. Now there's gonna be 54 posts put in, and this array was also first, I don't know how it was identified, and then later it was identified as an accessory to what's existing there now. This whole thing, I don't know, but the safety issue, when you have a gas pipeline in there and you want to get in even closer than what the township code says, that's scary. That's scary. That shouldn't even be considered. And this is something that I think perhaps the public should be made aware of, because this is frightening, especially when it was brought up at the beginning of this application that there were gas explosions in the state. And so for that reason alone, this shouldn't even be considered.
Thank you.
Is there a question? Sorry,
That
Chair.
was your statement, I think, Walter.
Yeah,
Any
my
other-
question
any other-
was, why does it have to be so close? If you need 75 feet, you have to bring it in at 50 feet. Why? Why, when there's a safety
I think the applicant
question.
counselor already said why they were here, because it would reduce the solar array by a third, not making the project economically feasible. And that's why they're coming here for the waiver.
Well, he also has to look at the safety aspect of it for the people that live there.
And that's what
Because
that's
if people who want to have these things will put them in their own backyard, then that's great. I'm all for that. But if you want to put it in someone else's backyard and make every day a scary situation, then that's a whole different ballgame.
Our testimony is that it is safe.
And I've already,
It's safe. Yeah, just like when the explosions, who was explaining that? Also,
Is there a question?
Yes, is there anyone here from the Texas Eastern Pipeline who can make comments on this? Because I think when they put their projects in, there were certain requirements for that project. Is there someone who's going to testify for Texas Eastern Pipeline as to what they feel about the safety of this?
I don't believe they're here. They're not part of the application.
Should they be as neighbors of this, or should they be also, have they been notified that this is something that's proposed?
I am sure they were if they are the property owners, because they're within 200 feet of the project. So
Okay, so you're saying you are sure that they were?
Mr. Bernstein?
So if I, I don't want this to go on forever, but generally when a pipeline or gas line gets constructed, they either condemn or purchase an easement, and it's the easement area that's the industry standard for general safety. And so what happens is the pipeline is in a certain location, and then the easement doesn't stop at the pipeline, it goes beyond that. So when you see new pipelines go in, there was one just in Montgomery Township last year. I think it was around 75 feet, or I'm not sure where the pipes were in relation to the easement, but basically that's the standard of safety. Hillsborough has gone beyond that with its ordinance and is taking a look at structures that are beyond the easement and safety issues. So they're being more protective than the company was itself. If the company felt there was a safety issue, they would have had more easement area. And this process allows the planning board to take a close look at safety to see, hey, maybe we don't want to put an apartment building right on the easement line, even though it would be permitted, it's too close. So let's move that habitable structure away. And that's not being proposed here. And then they also have the opportunity to look at disturbance. Somebody planting a tree, not so bad. Somebody blasting, probably not a good idea. So that's the purpose behind it.
And so what is the size of that easement? The pipeline, the pipeline's easement, not the requirement of the township. What is the easement of the pipeline? What's the size of that?
I believe
172 feet, I believe.
I would suggest you put the drawing up because the easement line is on the drawing.
it doesn't show the full width, but it shows the edge.
Right, it just shows the southern boundary, if you will.
More up, yeah.
Right under
no,
the
Blue line at
blue
the edge
line.
of the trees.
Yeah, right there.
Right there,
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so my question is, do the board members feel that it is okay to give a waiver for safety?
I would advise the board members not to answer that question. That's the question, that's the ultimate decision to be made
Right.
once all the testimony and the evidence has been placed before you.
Right. You'll find that out at the end of this hearing, what the board's feelings are when we take a vote one way or the other.
Okay, I think that should also be publicized to Hillsborough of what's going on by the gas pipeline.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the?
Thank you.
for the
No,
applicant?
no, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another audience member. Please admit them.
Please state your name and address for the record, please, spelling your last name.
Robert Kralovich, K-R-A-L-O-V-I-C-H,
Thank you.
291 Amwell. I'm the neighbor to the left. Couple things I want to square away with Degrazi. First off, the easement for a pipeline to go through later in life, because the pipeline is about 6 to 8 feet, the oldest one that's closest to it. I brought up the last meeting. This pipeline has been repaired on the southern part of Amwell Road right here. It's been repaired in 2 parts of the farm field last year. They found 2 significant leaks. They had to excavate, patch, repair. So I brought this up last meeting, that you're working closest to the oldest pipe that was put in 1942. The easement that was originally done, they put 25 feet from the edge of their right of way. That easement, the problem with that is, imagine going to all the neighbors that pipeline runs through and say, hey, we want another 50 feet of your property that you can't do anything on. You can't put a shed, you can't, build your kid a playhouse, this whole 9 yards. So to say the easement part and saying that's an easy, oh, that's why they didn't do it, because, it's safe where it's at. They know it's not safe because of the repairs they made. So that's here nor there. I said it in the last meeting. I'm concerned with you guys pile driving, especially with the shale. If you break that shale and send it into that pipe, my big question is, who is the contractor that is going to be responsible for any damage that, like, let's say they do pile drive, they put all the piles in, it separates the shale plate, it slides it in a pipe, breaks the pipe, blows up my house and all the property around me. How are we getting named on that certificate of insurance to provide us security to say, hey, if we blow your stuff up, you're covered? That's really my statement for tonight is who's going to cover any damage from any work that is done and who's responsible for it. And to say a Bobcat is going to go, the only thing it's going to do is trees and you're going to send a 1,500-pound pile driver in. I don't know if any of you guys ever seen a truck with an axle with a 1,500-pound pile driver. It's not a Bobcat. It's a pretty significant piece of equipment that you're driving over that property. The pipeline drive Bobcats up and down every year to maintain and cut the pipeline. That I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about planting trees and augers a foot down. The 6 feet, you guys may want to contact the pipeline and get the actual depth of that line and explain that you're going to be pile driving 6 feet, a piece of iron 6 feet into the ground into a shale plate. Comments? Walter?
I'm not, we've agreed that we will contact Texas Eastern and inquire about the depth of the plate, the pipeline. We do have geotechnical borings out there. We've looked at the soils. The 6 feet doesn't come down to anywhere near where any kind of refusal was encountered when the borings were done.
Really? Because I've plowed those fields behind the pipeline pretty much my entire life, and we have, if you go back there, it's all sections of shale. So, I mean, you may have a little higher topsoil from basically from decomposing trees and things of that nature over there. But if you're going down 6 feet, you're definitely hitting a shale plate. I mean, we can go out there with my backhoe. Like I said, I'll dig it and y'all show you. I mean, I'm going to go down maybe 1.5 feet until I hit a solid plate of shale. Again, all these farms around here, every one of them can tell you the worst. That's why they use chisel plows now. They don't use bottom plows because of the fact that the chisel plow is the only thing that rips through the shale. Yeah, and again, I'm not disputing that, but I like I said in the last meeting, I'm concerned with that. You got the oldest line that has multiple breaks in it within the past 12 months. And we're pile driving, we're driving heavy equipment over the top of it. When they put in the pipeline in 1987 underneath the road, that's when they had all 3 pipelines exposed. And if you look at the 2 of them, they were rotten back in 1987 when they put the last pipeline in. I'm just, it is a safety concern. I've said this last meeting, I'm concerned with it. The weight of the pile driver, you guys have another way to come in and not drive over the pipeline. You can come between.
We will not be driving over the pipeline. Nothing will drive over the pipeline.
Oh, well, somebody said before that that the machine's going to come in through the pipeline for the
No, that everything will come in through the existing parking lot. There will be nothing that will go over the pipeline. In fact, I don't think we'll have any equipment that will even go into the easement.
Okay. And Mr. DeGrazzi, please do not use the word hardship when it comes to Comcast cable, because they're the farthest thing from hardship in the state and in most of this country as far as what they charge. So the word hardship for that property, please don't use that term again. But now I go back to my original. What is it that we're going to protect the neighbors? Myself, basically myself and my neighbors that are around me. There's 4 of us that are directly affected. How are we going to feel comfortable? Because let me just put a hypothetical statement out here. You pile drive in, it breaks the pipeline, it blows up. I got to then go to the pipeline and pipeline say, you destroyed my property, I need it fixed. Well, we got to go back to the contractor that did this. It's a big circle. So how are we going to feel comfortable if something does happen? Again, property's property. It could be replaced, it could be rebuilt. Family wise, I'm far enough away. I think, like I said, as long as it's not like an Edison explosion, okay, we should all be good. If it's an Edison explosion, you're not going to ever hear from me again anyway. But how are we going to be protected? Is somebody going to list us as on their certificate of insurance that we are insured for any property damage from anything that happens from that? Because Texas Eastern will say, we're a utility, we're exempt.
So as with all construction projects, whether they're located near a gas line or not, any of the people that will be working or hired by the applicant will have insurance in place before
that certificate will be listed only to Comcast, not to the surrounding.
No, but it covers insurance covers outside the scope of just not property damage, incidents.
But if you're not, I don't mean to cut you off, but if you're not listed on that certificate of insurance, the red tape that you have to go through, I'd have to hire you to even get them to listen to me.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but any type of disturbance, even you driving back there and with your equipment and doing any type of disturbance they're planting with the shale is the same type of thing.
We don't plant on top of the pipeline. And
we're not near the pipeline. So the closest driver will be 50 feet away. That's the closest. And then everything is after that. So we're doing no work near the pipe. We're doing no work within the pipe easement, which is, like you said, something like 25 feet. And then the solar array itself and the first driver will be another 25 feet after that. So a total of 50 feet will separate the actual line from where we would be putting the array.
I totally understand. I've got a copy of the drawings in front of me. Walter, question for you. Do you think there is the slightest possibility that driving those piles in that one piece of shale could do anything to affect that pipeline?
I really don't think so.
You don't think so, or absolutely, definitely, positively not? Is there a glimmer? Is there a chance? Tell me there is absolutely no chance about you have a better chance of a meteor hitting your house. And this is you're being.
I don't know that probability.
I can't. What all I can tell you, Robert, is that I've looked at the geotechnical report. I've talked to the geotechnical engineer. I've talked to the structural engineers. The vibration or anything that's going to come from this driving it's a beam, right? It's an I section. It's not like a round pile. It drives through the soil. Mm-hmm. It's going to break up any shale as it hits it. It's not going to push it. It's going to crush it rather than pushing it out of the way and driving it 50 feet to the pipeline. I can assure you that's not going to happen.
Now, like I said, I've been on a lot of construction sites where they've driven piles. You can, and like I said, I don't know if you ever have. If you haven't,
absolutely,
you do it. Stand 50 feet away from a pile driver and tell me you don't feel that ground shake.
These are not the typical piles. I think that you're.
No, I know, but you'll still, like, if I'm standing on my property and he's driving piles, can I stop him because I say, wait, I feel it vibrating? Yeah, but this is where all I'm asking for, be named on the certificate of insurance for the neighbors that are surrounding this line. I don't think it's it's nothing but a name, but if something happens, we're covered. Is that a lot to ask? We're not talking telephone poles and wires. We're talking something that could, because if it blows up here, it could open up a trench a quarter mile wide. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever saw Edison firsthand. I saw Edison at the aftermath of that. And that
was construction where someone actually hit the line.
Exactly. But that hit the line in one spot and opened it up and basically took out a quarter mile of pipe.
Yeah, but
because it split the pipe and opened up the ground. And that pipe was 12 feet deep.
Yeah,
plus there was also a stolen truck down there, but that's
it was a direct hit of the line. It's not 50 feet away. The work was done right on top of the line.
No, I get it, but still, that was a newer pipe that's still split. All I'm asking for is how protect the neighbors. That's what I'm saying. Please protect the neighbors. Give us an option to say, okay, you guys are listed. Then if Walter says, absolutely not, I'd say, okay, good. Then nobody should have an issue with listing the 4 immediate neighbors from any damage to their property. There shouldn't, because it's just a name that goes on an insurance certificate. I do them all the time. I'm doing work in somebody's, at somebody's building, and we have a crane there. There's a lot of times where I have somebody next door going, I want you on a certificate of insurance. That crane blows over and blows. Look what happened in New Brunswick. I mean, it's off the subject, but it's, there was a crane that was working on one building, fell and took out a house. That house wasn't covered. They had to go back to the construction company, and then they removed the house and rebuilt them a new one. But they had to go through all the red tape to cut through. I don't want to go through red tape. My 3 neighbors don't want to go through red tape. They just want to say, okay, look, it happened. Let's get it rebuilt. Just protect us. That's all I'm asking. I don't think it's a far out request. And, like I said, I still think you should do the absolute from the gas company to find out what the depth of that line is, but protect the people that, protect the people around you. Is that Mr. Bernstein, is that something far out to ask for?
No, it isn't. The question is the applicant willing to do it?
Again, I'm not saying, hey, pay me.
It's not something the board can require. The question is the applicant willing to do it?
And again, I appreciate you guys. We're going to do the walkthrough. Now, one of the things you did say is you're going to do the walkthrough after the clearing. I thought we agreed that we were going to do a walkthrough before the clearing to make sure what's getting cleared. Because once you clear things, there's no putting it back. And I thought we discussed that we were going to do a site walk before things were cleared out.
If I recall that incorrectly, I apologize. We'll certainly do with whatever was required as a condition of that approval. We can mark out the clearing limits and then meet with you to verify those.
I mean, that's really, my biggest thing is, protecting myself and my neighbors and our families to make sure that if something out of the ordinary does happen, hey, I'm not looking for a certificate of insurance for 10 years ago. Oh, 10 years ago, you put piles in. Now again, I'm talking during this construction period. And when the panels are set and all the work is done, pipeline's done, your insurance is over. You know what I mean? But, but just protect the residents that are, that are around the surrounding area. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can get confirmation here. It's really an odd thing to have before the board, and I know that Comcast will be working with you on a couple of issues, and it's certainly something we can discuss.
Yeah, and again, a discussion's fine. I have no issue with it. But again, it's not something that you have to pay for. It's just names that go on an insurance certificate. That's all it is. It's not a contract. It's just if something happens, we can call the insurance company directly for damage and not have to go through the pipeline or through Comcast. That's all it is.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can get.
Want to take a few minutes, Mr. Browsey?
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so 5-minute recess. Reconvene at 8:50.
Okay, everybody mute yourselves and turn your cameras off if you like. We'll see you at 8:50. I'm back, Mike. I assume we'll take the obligatory roll call when we're ready on Mr. Bernstein's call.
I'll just wait to see some more faces.
Yeah.
All right, looks like the entire board's here. Although I don't see Eric.
I don't see Mr. Peason either. Oh, there he is.
All right.
And there he is.
So let me know when you want me to go.
Chairman, you ready? Or do you? I see Mr. DeGrazia back.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think we're ready for a roll call.
All good. All right, Mr. Emick. I see.
Unmute. There you go.
Mr. Ciccarelli.
Here.
Mr. Wagner.
Here.
Mr. Peason.
I'm here.
Mr. Scobo. Here. Mayor Lapani.
Yes.
Vice Chair Julian.
Here.
Chair Sirachi.
Here.
And then Mr. Kinsler.
Yes.
Mr. Gorman.
Present.
Mr. Euro.
Here.
And Mr. Bernstein.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we are returned from our brief recess. So I will go back to applicant's attorney to see what he.
Yeah, and I apologize because I'm not getting a very clear understanding. With this particular project, we have contractor, we have a solar provider, we also have a, Comcast itself. So we really can't commit to anything because we're not sure. We know that there is insurance requirements for the project and there's some through the solar provider, but at this point, because this is such an unusual thing to talk about at the zoning board, the people here this evening does not have like a clear understanding of
Let me try, Chris.
how it's-
What's the problem in any of these people who are involved with this project naming the 4 neighbors on the insurance as additional insureds?
I don't think that there will be. And I think what we can do is, and we would have to have the legal counsel for, say, for SunPower to take a look at it and commit to it. But at this point, I can't commit to it. I could say we can look at it in good faith and deal directly with the neighbors and advise them. But at this point, without having the information and without having corporate counsel look at it, it's something that I can't commit to or at this point. It's really beyond what you typically talk about at a planning and zoning board. I can tell you the insurance will be in place, but I can't tell you if corporate counsel would have an issue or if there would be any problem with us getting that. So like I said, it's a very unusual request. I don't think we outright, have an issue exploring it, and we can certainly do that. But
How long would it take to get the answer?
I assume pretty quickly.
May I interject? As an insurance agent, you don't want your neighbors to be additional insureds. That prohibits then you become the insured. So if something happens to you, it prohibits your right to sue the responsible party. You want additional insureds for your subcontractors. The neighbors aren't subcontractors. So you want to make sure that the project runners, have insurance or that they're financially viable, which I would think SunPower, I just looked them up, and Comcast is. So, you know, the issue of adding them to their insurance policy, I don't think applies.
Yeah, but Rob, the other side of it is, have you ever tried calling Comcast?
Well, it's still, you don't, if you're an additional insured, then you can't sue them because you are one of the insureds.
I don't want to sue anybody. If they do damage, I want it repaired under their insurance blanket.
Understand, but what you're asking for to be an additional insured on their certificate of insurance prohibits then you from taking recourse against them. You become them.
Right, but I'm insured where they have to repair the damage that's done.
No, you're an additional insured. If somebody sues you, you hand the lawsuit over to Comcast. It's totally different. What you're asking for is not applicable. What you want to know is that they have insurance and that somehow you're guaranteed to get paid if something happens.
So
that's different than being an additional insured. That's all I'm saying. It's that being a certificate holder confers no rights to you whatsoever.
So how do I get that? How do I get that to know that they're insured? And if there is an issue, that I don't have to go to Comcast or SunPower or the pipeline, that I can go directly and say, look, you did this, it needs to be fixed. Where's who?
Well, you can get an evidence of insurance, and I highly doubt that they're uninsured.
Okay.
So, Mr. Bernstein, is this a question for this witness?
We're far afield.
Sorry.
To put it mildly, I understand Mr. Peason's desire to assist. I understand Mr. DeGrassi's desire to resolve this. To the extent that he needs to talk to his client about how to try to address this, assuming this is an issue, the board wants to see addressed as part of the approval, which is a separate issue in and of itself.
So just typically, and Mr. Gorman, might be best with an application or an applicant, such as this, would they include their proof of insurance as part of any application? I see Mr. Bernstein already shook his head no. So could that be something that we could request to have provided so it's on file and readily available for one of the neighbors to obtain a copy? If they so do, please.
I understand the question, Mr. Chairman, and sorry to interrupt Mr. Peason at the same time. I believe this is something that might have to actually be done when they file with construction permits, if I'm not mistaken. A default to council to any idea in that regard, or maybe Mr. Scarbo has some additional insight on that.
The answer is, it usually is with the construction permits, but if the parties were willing to do so, it could be a potential assistance. I wouldn't put it as a condition of approval, but that it would be provided within a period of time after the resolution was memorialized and prior to construction permits being taken out.
Yeah, my familiarity with this is that the insurance policy is an agreement between parties. Having it as part of a resolution at that point, as part of a compliance matter, is a foreign matter to me, which will require potential research on my part. But I can't comment any further on that.
And I'd like to say my stance on that as well. I just want to know that we're all protected, because if we're all not protected, all four of us are going to say absolutely not. 75 feet, you lose a third of your solar, point blank. And if that moves forward and it gets approved, then other actions will have to be taken, because now they're going beyond, and I don't believe a waiver should be submitted at that point. So
I think one of the things we can agree to is providing certificate of insurance. That's pretty easy.
I mean, like I said, Chris, make sure we're protected. If I got a hole in my ground, you blow something up, it's fixed. That's all. And I want to know who to call to fix it. That's all. It's really what we're looking for. You got the pipe, again, this pipeline could break from there all the way across the two neighbors, and the one neighbor goes right, by the two, by their two garages. Catastrophic damage it could be. Me in the back, not so much a big deal. You're going to buy me a couple tractors. But other than that, like I said, I want to know that we're protected, and I want, and also with that being said, I want the contractor to realize, because my eyes are going to be out watching everything that they do back there, and I see them on the pipeline, damn well I'm kicking them off. And if not,
we are going to be nowhere near the pipeline. I agree.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, I'm protecting myself and my neighbors. Be happy that all 4 of my neighbors aren't on the phone, because then it would go to 11 o'clock again, like it always seems to go. But I just want to know that everybody's protected. I want to know that the people that are doing it are competent. I want to make sure that the pile driving company has a good record. I don't want the lowest bidder getting the piles, and that's who gets something wrecked. This is a private contract, so I'm hoping that everything goes smooth. And again, I'm trying to, I'm agreeing to things. I'm not saying, I'm saying everything was fine to that point. I was concerned about the pipeline in the last meeting. As long as I have somebody that I can go to and not have to call 1-800 Comcast to try to get somewhere, I'm fine with that. And I believe my neighbors would be fine with that as well. And, going back to the site walk before the trees are cut down.
Okay.
That's all I have to say at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So since we had taken a break, I'm just going to see if any additional members for the public have any questions for the applicant.
Applicant's engineer.
Applicant's engineer, yes.
I see none, Chairman.
Neither do I. Counselor, you may continue.
Sure. We have our planner here. Christine, are you there?
I am, yes, hi.
Hi. I thought if you could talk a little bit about the standard here under the code.
Sure.
Let me just swear you in,
Probably I
Christine.
should be sworn, yeah.
Yep.
Do you swear any testimony you give tonight is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And for the record, can you state and spell your name, please?
Certainly. It's Christine Nazaro, Nazzaro, Cofone, Cofone. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701.
Thank you.
And this has been called out as a waiver, not a variance, I believe, by Mr. Maskey. So I'm sorry, I didn't give my credentials yet. Sorry. Sorry. Good evening. Christina Zaracofone, licensed professional planner. I've testified here in Hillsborough in excess of over 400 planning and zoning boards throughout the state as an expert witness. I'm currently the principal and owner of the Cofone Consulting Group. I've been practicing for 25 years as a land use consultant. I also teach planning and zoning courses for the Rutgers Center for Government Services, and I'm an affordable housing special master in about 30 different municipalities.
Okay, any objections from any board members? I see head shakes no, so you may continue. We will accept and you may continue.
Thank you, Chairman. So the test really here, because we're not seeking a variance, is essentially the reasonableness of the waiver, and does it have any negative impact on the intent of the ordinance section that it's violative of, and can we still meet the intent of the ordinance? And here, when you have the ordinance that specifically applies to buildings, and yes, it does use the word disturbance, I think that the board can certainly be comforted by the fact that we are not, as Mr. Bronson testified, we are not driving equipment over this area. We're not using heavy equipment in this area. We are not proposing any changes to the site plan that was previously approved by this board for this location of the proposed solar array. So I think at this point, really, it comes down to do we really impair the intent of that purpose of the ordinance? And I think that this is really, we are not putting something or introducing something into that buffer that, in my opinion, or the opinion of our professional team here, that is going to have a violative or, do violence to the intent of having that buffer, giving the limited disturbance that's going to occur in that. We're really just looking to place some benign solar panels. We're not bringing employees to the site to go there. We're not having habitable structures. So I think that you have to really look at what the intent is and what we are violating the buffer to do. And again, when you look at that section of the ordinances, the purpose of the provision specifically states it's to address safety by keeping habitable buildings away from the pipeline to avoid any construction impacts. So that's really, essentially what was intended to be done with that section. And the way it reads is, it states that no new building construction or land disturbance shall be permitted within 75 feet of the right-of-way line. And certainly what we're doing with the limited disturbance to the buffer area is not something, in my opinion, that would rise to the level of not allowing us to meet the intent of that ordinance, given the very limited impacts. And of course, as a team, I know we heard a lot of discussion tonight about the insurance, but as a condition of approval, I'm certain that the applicant could accept a condition that we will of course have insurance and be insured for the work that we do. And I think that would provide protection to anybody who would be concerned about this application. So I see no reason why the board can't approve this waiver. I know I spoke the last time I testified on this application. I testified about renewable energy sources, which solar is, being an inherently beneficial use. So I think that is an important consideration, is that here you have the ability to have some limited buffer disturbance to allow for the construction of an inherently beneficial use.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any board members, questions, comments?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. So what's being proposed tonight with the buffers and with the solar arrays, nothing will interfere from even the utility from accessing their own easement at this point to do any work within their right of way, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
No further questions.
Thank you. Any other board members, board professionals?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I will open up to anyone public that would like to ask this witness a question, and I see a hand that went up very quickly, so please.
Please
let
state
me
your name,
know if that's it.
state your name and address for the record, please. And again, questions only for this witness.
Maria Janusik. The question is, does the witness consider 54 posts being driven 6 to 7 feet into the ground not a disturbance?
No, I didn't.
54 posts being driven 6 to 7 feet into the ground, and they're not, and that is not disturbing the land, according to you. Yes?
No, that's not what I said, Ms. Janusik. We do need a variance we do need the waiver to allow for that disturbance. So we certainly are having some disturbance. But I think when you look at what the ordinance required, it requires that there not be any new buildings, construction permitted within 75 feet. So the ordinance is trying to limit that type of activity. And Mr. Bronson already testified as to the equipment that we would be using to drive those into the grounds. And once that occurs,
if you ain't first or last.
excuse me, if you're not first or last, I'm not sure what that means, but
That's somebody else's feedback.
Yeah, we have
Yes, I think so.
somebody feedback.
yeah.
Thank you, Christy.
Third one, please everyone go on mute if possible. Thanks.
So, Ms. Janusik, there will be disturbance, but I think the disturbance will be limited. And I think that's what the board has to consider when you're looking at this waiver. It's not as if that there will be continued and perpetual and repeated disturbance. Once those are in place, then this is not the type of situation where you're going to have employees coming to the site or a lot of activity. They'll sort of be constructed there with without the benefit of having equipment driving over the buffer, as Mr. Bronson said. So that's, I think, a consideration as well as to, yes, of course, there will be disturbance. And if I seem to indicate that there wouldn't be, I apologize for that, because there will be, and that's why we're here seeking the waiver. But the disturbance is of a very limited nature.
Okay, yes, because your language was very, like, it's just going to be la, 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 and that's it. And it's a very powerful, I think, a nature that's going to be, you've got 54 posts going into the ground. And so that is not something to be taken lightly, especially around, like Mr. Kralovich said, especially around a pipeline, an old pipeline. And now as far as the inherent beneficial use, for whom is this going to be? For whom specifically is this use going to be?
So there's case law in New Jersey that holds that renewable energy sources such as this, such as the solar, is a inherently beneficial use because it benefits. What inherently beneficial uses are those uses that are important to our community as a whole or our communities as a whole, and they have a greater value. And there are things like schools and hospitals that really serve to promote the general public welfare. And that's not unique to Hillsborough. That's not it wasn't my determination. There's certainly been court decisions that determine that solar and renewable energy are inherently beneficial uses.
Okay, and I've heard that too, but I'm asking specifically this solar array, who is this going to be benefiting?
I would direct that question to the applicant. So, and I don't know that you don't have to identify the specific end user, but certainly renewable energy is a inherently beneficial use.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that too. They're talking about green energy and all that. But my question was, who is benefiting by this? Because if this is strictly beneficial to the applicant only, then why should everybody agree to waivers and compromise safety just to benefit the applicant? So, and that's, this applicant is not someone who's poor and, you know, let's help him out. So we need to look at what's going on with this application. And there were a lot of issues, and this safety issue is a huge one. And why this wasn't discussed more at the first meeting is, to my opinion, questionable.
Well,
I believe I'm sorry, let me just interject 1 second, Christine, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I believe the inherently beneficial use is that it reduces the amount of fossil fuels used to create electricity to the benefit of the environment and everyone. So from that standpoint, it is to the benefit of everyone. It doesn't, the inherently beneficial use does not have anything to do with monetary value.
That's a fair statement, Mr. Bronson. And I also don't think that it's a fair characterization to say that our application is unsafe. We are at least 50 feet away from the gas line. And I don't think that what we're proposing is an unsafe scenario for the community of Hillsborough.
Well, then I would like to know, who was it that introduced that section of the Hillsborough Code, and who believed that 75 feet was the required distance for safety?
Well, again, I don't think that
because everyone could make their own comments and say, well, I don't think 50 feet is necessary. I don't think 20 feet is. Everybody, depending on whose side they're on, can make those same comments. But this is in the Hillsborough Code, 75 feet. So what's being requested is a waiver from safety.
Yes, and I think you have to look at the intent of that ordinance, which leads with not having building construction or land disturbance within 75 feet of the right of way. So I think the board can certainly take notice of what that disturbance is, because as Mr. Bronson alluded to earlier than that in the evening, there are many different types of disturbance that can occur, which is why you evaluate these applications on a case-by-case basis. And simply to drive the piles, although there are 54 of them, into the ground and not have anything within 50 feet, I think the board can consider that, particularly when you're evaluating an inherently beneficial use in your community. I think at no time did anybody on our team suggest that the board should do anything unsafe or that there's anything unsafe about our application. Our team simply does not share that opinion with you. And we think that given the limited activity, as well as the 50-foot separation from the pipeline, that there will be no negative impact if the waiver is in fact granted.
Okay, do you have the exact wording of that section 188-75 of the Hillsborough Township Code?
It states, yes.
And what it specifically
reads,
says?
No new building construction or land disturbance shall be permitted within 75 feet of the right of way of any distribution, gathering, or transmission line. Then it goes on to say other things, but that's that what I just read is a direct cite from section 188-75.
Okay, so it says no new building construction or land disturbance. So now what is the definition of land disturbance?
Well, we are disturbing the land. I mean, we need the waiver. We're not trying to hide from that. We are asking for the waiver. It wasn't picked up in the original application. It was picked up this evening. We're asking for it. We're not saying that we're not disturbing the land and we don't need the waiver. We're saying that the disturbance that we are doing to the land is not going to have a substantial negative impact to the easement separation that we're required to have.
Okay, not have a negative impact based on what? You're going to have how many posts in there? What else has to be done besides the posts being put in?
There is no other disturbance.
Nothing else? Nothing, no. Okay. Now, when that array is built, does there have to be any kind of maintenance done on this at all?
There may basically be some landscaping in the, I think there may be some landscaping as well. So I just want to correct my testimony.
This was all really addressed at the first meeting.
Yes.
These are self-maintained. There's very little maintenance after you construct it, other than just general groundskeeping with the plants. So, but again, I'm not sure how that relates to what we're talking about here.
So the plantings and all that, where is that going to be? Is that going to be within the beyond the 75 feet? Is it going to be closer like what you're asking for now, 50 feet versus 75 feet?
This witness hasn't talked about that. That was the last witness, and we went through the exhibits and showed you and described it in detail. So everything that occurred was the last witness, and you already cross-examined that person. This witness is talking about the planning testimony. So if you have any questions related to planning, that would be appreciated.
Well, I thought she was talking about disturbance of the area around there, the
Yep.
buffer. I
And
thought she was
said there
talking
is
about the disturbance.
But it's our position that it's not creating an unsafe condition. So taking it,
Well, so my question then was about the plantings. Are they also going to be within that area? Or are they going to be 75? The plantings are 75 feet away?
It was, Ms. Jenny said it was already shown on the map. Maybe we need to bring the drawing back up.
I'm just asking, will the plantings be 75 feet away?
They will not be. No, the plantings are within the buffer. Or
So
within
there's going to be plantings within the buffer. So you need a variance for those plantings?
We don't need a variance. We need a waiver.
I mean, a waiver. So you need a waiver for plantings, you need a waiver for the posts.
It's all the same waiver, Ms. Janasek. It's all the
Okay.
same. And all this testimony was given prior when you were asking questions before. The same testimony was given by the engineer, and all the stuff that you're asking was all answered prior.
But at that time, it was going to be 75 feet away, yes?
No, it was the same as it always has. The plan shows that the
what are we
plantings are
asking?
within the buffer. So they would need a waiver for all of it. The plantings, the disturbance of the piles, the fence, and the road is all within that buffer.
Okay, so at the first meeting, the waiver was
No, it was
requested
not
for the
talked about in the
plantings.
first meeting, Ms. Janasek. It was
But you're
talked
that's what you're telling me, that it was talked about. That's why you're
tonight. It was all
confusing me.
talked about at the previous testimony tonight. When the engineer gave his testimony, this was all discussed when he gave the testimony, we showed this map several times and we talked about where everything was going to be.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other person from the public Ms. Cofone, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, I see.
Oh,
your-
I'm sorry. I'm accidentally raised my hand.
You must have raised your hand.
No,
Sorry.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
You can speak.
No, I'm
I
good. Thank you.
Chairman, I see no other hands, so I think you can continue. Carl, did we lose you? I think we may have lost the chairman.
Uh-oh.
I think we lost him about a minute ago.
Yeah.
Well, in the absence of the
Vice Chair Neil,
we have the vice chair. Mr. Julian.
I'll keep an eye on him for Carl to come back.
Is there any other testimony Counselor, that you
We
need?
we do not have any other direct testimony at this time.
So I guess at this time, Mr. Bernstein, you just want to summarize things so that we can move along?
Council
sorry.
have any last words?
No, I think, like I said earlier, we had revised the plans in accordance with what this board asked us to do. It was unfortunate that we didn't have that specific section of the code identified last time as a waiver. We've gone through, we've specifically outlined what work will be done and how it will be done. And we think that it's a really good project in terms of renewable energy. And we hope that the board would continue to support the project.
The issue here, as council has indicated, is addressing a waiver that if it had been identified prior to the last hearing.
Excuse me, Mr. Bernstein, it's Fred Kinsler, IT. I just want to make note that Chairman's back.
Yes, my Comcast internet.
Carl, it happened to me last night, so. All right, sorry to interrupt, Eric.
As I was saying, this would have been addressed at the last hearing if it in fact had been identified, which it was not, and addressed accordingly. Therefore, the applicant is back at the request of the planning department to request the waiver. You heard the testimony of applicant's engineer and applicant's planner. You've also heard comments made by members of the public, a neighbor and a resident of the township relative to the request for a waiver. The issue is whether or not the board is willing to grant the waiver pursuant to the application as it relates to the ordinance, to the township code provision in question. There are also a couple of related but non-waiver issues involving coverage of insurance and whether or not one of the potential conditions is a representative from Texas Eastern be present if they so choose during construction. Is the applicant willing to agree to that condition?
Yeah, I think the applicant agreed that it would be willing to provide evidence of insurance, that the applicant would reach out to the pipeline and provide notification of, ask for information also about the depth and provide notification of when the work will be done. And if the pipeline would like to have somebody on site at that time, I guess that's up to the pipeline, but we can certainly agree to a condition that we would provide notice to them.
And you'll provide copies to the board.
Sure.
Anyone else have any questions, issues, etc. from the board?
Yeah,
Mr.
I'd like, and this is for Mr. Bronson, I believe, to clarify.
You're
I
still
just took
under
a look
oath,
at your,
Mr. Bronson.
I just took a look at the drawings, SG 302. And this is actually also for the benefit of the participants from the public. The pile, the foundation plan shows a pre-drilled 6-foot hole into which the I-beam web section will be driven. And it's actually a minimum of 4.5 feet or until it meets the proper refusal, the pile driving resistance. So there's actually a pre-drilled shaft into which the piles will be banged. And so I just want to confirm that, one thing. And the second thing, I'm sorry, can you confirm the size of the hammer? Because I thought you said 150 pounds. I heard 1,500 pounds. Is a big difference. So can you just address those two items for the board?
You're still under oath, Mr. Bronson.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Let me just check the information I have from the structural engineer is that it is a 1,500-pound hammer.
Okay.
And it is my understanding that the intent is to drive the piles, not to pre-drill them. And I'm looking for where that information is that you're referencing on pre-drilling.
SG 302.
SG3.
It was at the
Is there-
previous meeting.
All of my plans are C sheets, so I'm not sure what plans it is you're referencing. It may have been prepared by another engineer.
Yeah, RBI Solar.
They're the structural engineers.
Mr. Ciccarelli, this is Fred Kinsler. Is that on Civic Clerk, something I could bring up and share?
Yeah, it's on, yeah.
Would that
was
be
it-
helpful to the board, Mr. Bernstein? Is that okay?
Would have any problems with that? The witness testified at the last hearing. This was evidence that was introduced, was it not, I believe, John? At the
Yes,
last
11,
hearing?
yeah, 11,
5.
5.
All right, I'm
And
going to see if I can find that. John, was that under tonight's meeting, or did you have to go back to get that too?
you had to go back to 11.5.
All right.
And then it's,
I was just talking with my client offline. I should say emailing with my client offline. And it's his representation that that's an option on the plans, but it is not one that we are proposing at this time.
Okay, I will leave it be then.
all right, thank you.
Any other board member?
Would it be possible for the holes that are within the buffer do the pre-drill method, and then those outside the buffer do the regular driving method? So do a hybrid on the site? Would you be amenable to that, Counselor?
I think that would be acceptable. So do either some pre-drill or full drill for those within the buffer area, and then the typical pile outside of. I believe that if it was proposed as an option, I think that would be acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ciccarelli.
All right.
Any other members of the board?
Don't see any.
Mr.
Therefore-
Chairman, it looks like there's a couple more people on the attendees from the public, if there is still an opportunity open to public comment.
We haven't closed it, so I would say last bite at the apple for anyone in the audience.
Chairman, this is Fred Kinsler. I'm the IT consultant, but I also am a resident and would like to make a public comment on this. It's Fred Kinsler, 5 White Meadow Road, Hillsborough, Kinzler. So I would just ask the board, I live about a half mile from this site, and I would just ask the board to make a condition that somebody from Texas Eastern is guaranteed to be on site when they're doing this. I know the pipeline runs right behind my house, and anytime there's any construction, any building on near or around the pipeline, there is always a Texas Eastern person on site with the contractors. And I would request that be a part of this proposal, that if it goes through, that's a condition of approval. That's all. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Mr. Bernstein, is that something we can do?
Back on.
I would object because we can't control that. I think what we can say is we can provide them notice and request that they be present, but there's no physical way that we can propel them to be there. it's nothing that we can do to satisfy it. They have to actually want to be there. So we will notify them. We will request their presence. But as far as an absolute condition that they be there, we can't agree to that because it's not something we have control over.
But you can work with their schedule.
Well, presumably if they want to be there, but if they say, no, we don't want to be there, that's putting something on that we can't satisfy.
Yeah, no, I understood. That's fair enough. I just want to make sure.
Well, then let's add up an alternate, which is that you will seriously request that a representative from Texas Eastern be present. And if they advise you that they will not be present, that you advise the board immediately upon such notification, so the record indicates they were given the offer and chose to not accept.
That'd be great. Thank you.
In writing.
In writing, obviously, for everyone's benefit.
Yeah.
On that, I see no other hands up, Chairman.
Okay, so I'll make request a motion to close to public.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we do not have a motion yet. Mr. Bernstein, you've already.
Well, what I've laid out, Mr. Chairman, is it's a motion to grant the waiver sought by Sun Power Corporation, Comcast, 20 PB02 SPV for a waiver on the minimum buffer area, as well as all previously granted minor site plan approval, C-bulk variances and waivers, in addition to the conditions approved by the parties, which included contact with and interaction with representatives from Texas Eastern, and a serious request that they attend any construction, the use of a hybrid system, which had been proposed originally at the November 5th meeting in terms of driving the piles with pre-driven holes for those within the buffer and the standard outside the buffer, that the applicant will work with the neighbors to the site relative to coverage issues to the extent possible, to the satisfaction possible with said neighbors. Council, you're aware of all of them, I'm sure. All of the neighbors within.
I'm not sure. I think we kind of pulled back from the providing people as inherent,
We're not asking for additional.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that I think
we're asking for you, however, to work with the neighbors, who I'm sure the individual who appeared this evening will be more than happy to provide you their addresses if they don't have them. Keep us on the loop, and that you are working with them on insurance-related issues as it relates to the construction.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And any and all other agreements that the parties made on the record.
Thank you. So with that motion as summarized by Mr. Bernstein, is there anyone that would like to offer a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Julian made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second.
Second by Mr. Peason.
By Mr. Peason, yes. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Emick,
Emick, yes.
Mr. Ciccarelli,
Ciccarelli, yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Wagner, yes.
Mr. Peason,
Peason, yes.
Mr. Scobo,
Yes.
Mayor Lapani,
Yes.
Vice Chair Julian,
Yes.
Chair Sirachi.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Thank you all for the professionals on behalf of Sun Power.
Eric, just a procedure question. I think when you get this together, I know you typically send out a draft, and I appreciate that, but I'm not sure if the board actually ever adopted the last one, so that should be also scheduled.
I believe they did, but if they, I will
did?
check. I will check. Patrick, would you check? My recollection is they did. If not, we will make sure it's in one big happy package.
I never received a signed.
All right, I don't know. Normally, and I can't speak, the planning department would send out the approved resolution. So Patrick will check with Deborah to see whether or not this is, I would assume it was, only because for purposes of the record, Chris, I haven't been harassed asking for it. So that's usually the indication that it has, but if not, we will take care of that piece as well as this.
Okay, appreciate
And
it.
the process will be the same.
Tomorrow.
You'll get the new resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have a business meeting scheduled for April the 22nd and a regular meeting from May the 6th. Are there applications on for the May 6th meeting, Patrick?
Yes, for May 6th, I have JSM.
Okay. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that we not cancel that the board not cancel the 22nd meeting tonight, but they give you the authorization to cancel it.
Okay, you think we may need that?
Anything is possible at this current time. So if for any reason I need to bring something to the board,
Right.
or something is coming from the township committee to the board, there may be, I don't know from the mayor yet, whether there's an ordinance currently potentially pending that would probably require some kind of board action. So I'd ask you all, A, to make yourselves still available for the 22nd, and B, that the authorizing chair to cancel the meeting if so desired without further notice. I need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Motion by Lapani, second by Pearson.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Emick,
Emick, yes.
Mr. Chicarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Peason,
Yes.
Mr. Scobo.
Yes.
We were gonna say, I thought.
Mayor
Ron-
Lapani, yeah, me too.
Yes.
Vice Chair Julian
Yes.
and Chair Sarachi.
Yes. Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, with that, there is nothing else before this board.
I'm gonna give Patrick, any other final comments?
No, just a JSM for May 6th that was carried from March 11th without further notice. That's all I have at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So with that, I entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned.
Everybody stay safe.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
In a
Good night.
couple of weeks, but definitely in 3. Take care.